Good morning. Welcome, everyone. I have the honor, the privilege of introducing Raegan, Reifenrath, who is going to share with us her honors research project that she put much time and energy into this past year, culminating in today's senior honors colloquium presentation. Please join me in welcoming Raegan. Oh, I'm supposed to read more, aren't I? Raegan is the daughter of Justin and Corrine of Laurel, Nebraska. Raegan, a graduate of Emerson Hubbard Senior High School, is double majoring in psychology and human services. While at Wayne State College, she has been involved in WALK, Resident Hall Association, Lutheran Campus Ministries, Alpha Lambda Delta Honors Society, Pi Gamma Mu Honors Society, and the International Honor Society, Psychi, in psychology. Raegan will be graduating in spring of 2024. After graduation, Raegan plans to continue her education by earning a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling at Wayne State College. Now, please join me in welcoming Raegan.
Hello, everybody. So, because of several high expectations and life responsibilities, college students' mental health is often negatively affected. This is because of high expectations to maintain good grades, work part-time, and maintain healthy social and family lives. Many studies have shown that daily journaling can have a positive effect on mental health and well-being. For instance, daily journaling can positively affect health service workers, specifically individuals in the nursing profession. For instance, in Crumella's study, nurses were asked to complete gratitude journals every day in order to reflect on aspects of their days that bring them joy. Additionally, Crumella explained that journaling is low impact, low cost, and easy to implement. Some positive effects of daily journaling include improved mental health, lower rates of burnout, stress management, and self-reflection. Health service workers are not the only group that have benefited from daily journaling. Additionally, it has been shown that journaling can have a positive effect for COVID-19 patients, addiction recovery, as well as many other individuals. In fact, Kretzmann et al. Found that daily independent journaling over the course of 2 weeks resulted in improved mental health, well-being, and recovery. Additionally, when participants were asked about effects of daily journaling, it was found that the intervention helped increase optimism and pride in the recovery process. There have been several inventories, indexes, and scales created to measure mental health, well-being, depression, and suicidal ideation. Because of this, there are several inventories to choose from. One of these options is the Beck Hopelessness Scale, formulated by Aaron T. Beck, the creator of cognitive behavioral therapy. In fact, Crano et al. States that hopelessness has been shown to be the most important long-time risk factor for suicide, end quote. Because of these factors, it is clear that the Beck Hopelessness Scale would be an adequate tool to measure mental health, well-being, and suicidal ideation among college students participating in a journaling intervention. Another experiment conducted by Tang et al. Investigated the effect of positive psychology, expressive writing for female patients with schizophrenia. This study consisted of a control group and an experimental group that participated in an intervention that involved 2 weeks of expressive writing exercises. Several mental health scales and inventories were used to measure the effect that the intervention had on the patient's stigma, hope, and overall quality of life. At the end of the trial, it was found that the patients showed many benefits from the exercise, including the reduction of stigma, emotional stability, and increased positive feelings such as happiness, hope, and gratitude. All of this information on journaling poses another important question. Do all journaling intervention techniques provide similar results? It seems that the lack of motivation makes it difficult to continue daily reflective journaling over a long period of time. Fuji et al. Investigated what they referred to as positive diary journaling. Essentially, the positive diary intervention involved journaling 3 positive aspects or events from each day, as well as reasons for why these impacted the individual. They found that mental health and well-being scores positively improved using several general mental health inventories. Although a positive effect was found, the groups of this experiment were very small, likely because of the coronavirus pandemic, with about 19 participants per group. Because of this, it is not clear whether these positive results were found because of the intervention or other compounding factors. Overall, this experiment had interesting results and shows that more research is needed in regard to positive diary journaling. It is clear that many studies have been done on the effect that journaling can have on mental health and well-being, but we are still left with questions about whether positive journaling, which is journaling that implements aspects of positive psychology and focuses on positive feelings, self-improvement, and hope for the future, has a greater effect than neutral journaling. Neutral journaling is journaling about one's general joys and stressors of daily life. It is important to research this topic to investigate if positive journaling prompts, specifically focusing on growth and improving one's life, have a greater effect than neutral ones. Since positive psychology and daily journaling have shown to have positive effects on individuals, this research project could help to answer this gap in research and help many people to improve their mental health and personal lives. In this study, it was hypothesized that the hopelessness scores from the Beck Hopelessness Scale would improve as the weeks progress. It was also hypothesized that since both experimental groups will be completing daily journaling prompts, their hopelessness scores will improve at a faster rate than the control group that does not complete any daily journaling. If scores do increase at a faster rate for the experimental groups, then this points to the intervention being successful in lowering the likelihood for hopelessness, as well as associated symptoms and tendencies in college students. Participants for this experiment were recruited using flyers and a recruitment email. If individuals were interested in participating in the experiment, then they could sign up by completing a Google form. In this survey, participants were asked for their age. This was to ensure that all participants were at least 19 years old, the legal age of consent in Nebraska. At the end of recruitment, there were 7 recruitments under the age of 19 years old, and because of this, I emailed these participants to inform them they were ineligible to participate in the study. After vetting for participants under 19 years old, there were a total of 62 participants, 49 of which identified themselves as female and 12 of which identified as male. One participant preferred not to identify as either male or female. Because of a high rate of mortality as the study progressed, the data showed that the positive experimental group had 9 participants, the neutral experimental group had 7 participants, and the control group had 10 participants. In other words, there were many participants that did not complete the journal prompts and surveys, and because of this, there was limited data to analyze. The most important material used for the experiment was the Beck Hopelessness Scale. This inventory consisted of 20 true or false questions developed by Aaron T. Beck. This scale can be used to get a numerical hopelessness score, and then a Google form with the Beck Hopelessness Scale, as well as some additional questions to control for compounding variables was sent to all potential participants. Some of the compounding variables included gender, year in school, added stressors, and then participating in activities like mindful meditation, deep breathing, and therapy. This survey was sent via Outlook email to all Wayne State College students, including undergraduate and graduate students. Participants used their personal computers and cell phones to complete the initial survey. Additional surveys were sent to participants halfway through and at the conclusion of the experiment, using a Canvas course link to the Google Forms. This survey asked the true or false questions from the Beck Hopelessness Scale, and at the beginning of the experiment, all participants electronically signed an informed consent form. This form stated that the participation was voluntary, and at any point within the study, individuals could quit if they wished to do so. Institutional Review Board approval was received on September 28, 2023. I then proceeded to recruit participants until October 22nd. All Wayne State College students over the age of 19 years old, both undergraduate and graduate, were included. And at the conclusion of the recruitment, participants were randomly separated into 3 groups: the positive experimental group, the neutral experimental group, and the control group. Once separated into groups, participants were added to a Canvas course for their respective groups. In the Canvas page, participants were unable to view the other members of the group. Throughout the experiment, individuals in both the experimental groups were asked to complete journal prompts every weekday using Canvas modules. The journal prompts used throughout week 1 for the positive experimental group are listed on this slide. An example of one of these prompts is, quote, describe the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word love. Reflect on times in your life when you were truly loved and cared for. On the other hand, the journal prompts used throughout week 2 for the positive experimental group are listed on this slide. Some of these include, quote, think about the happiest moment of your life. Did something special happen at that point in time, or was it just everyday life? How did you celebrate? And were you together with friends or family members? What details come to mind once you remember that specific instance of joy? End quote. End quote. Take some time to think about the future. Describe the best possible life you've ever imagined. Is it totally attainable now, or would it require many changes? What would you need to do to bring such an existence into reality? End quote. These journal prompts were found from an outside source and were chosen based on if they elicited feelings of joy or hope for the future. The neutral experimental group had the same journal prompt every day. This prompt was, quote, write about anything that stood out to you today. How was your day? What are your plans for tomorrow? End quote. This prompt was created by myself in order to recreate notebook journaling without a prompt. At the end of each week, participants were also asked to complete a survey. This survey consisted of the Beck Hopelessness scale and was completed using the Google form. This experiment was concluded with a debriefing statement at the conclusion of the week 2 module on all Canvas courses. The phone number and email for the Wayne State College Counseling Center were included in this statement, as well as how to contact Dr. Dan Miller and myself with any questions regarding the results of the study. Now on to design. To measure the change in mental health, well-being, and the absence of hopelessness, the Beck Hopelessness Scale was implemented. According to Klein et al., the Beck Hopelessness Scale, which was first developed in 1974, consisted of 20 true or false questions. For example, the first question states, quote, I look forward to the future with hope and enthusiasm, end quote. To get a final score, each individual answer was analyzed, giving 1 for each positive answer and a 0 for each negative answer. Because of this, the highest number that you could possibly score for this test is a 20. In other words, the participant would score this if they answered positively to all 20 questions. On the other hand, the lowest score possible for this inventory is 10. Participants would get the score if they answered negatively on each question. For scoring the Beck Hopelessness Scale, questions 1, 3, 5, 6, 8, 10, 13, 15, and 19 are keyed true, and questions 2, 4, 7, 9, 11, 12, 14, 16, 17, 18, and 20 are keyed false. The items of the Beck Hopelessness Scale were designed to measure feelings of mood, sense of failure, feelings of guilt, and self-accusation. For this experimental design of the study, there were 2 independent variables. These were 1, the type of journaling prompts given to the participants, and 2, the time of testing. The 3 conditions for the type of journaling prompts are either positive prompts, neutral prompts, or no prompts. On the other hand, all participants completed the Beck Hopelessness Scale as a pre-test to establish their baseline, as well as after 1 week and 2 weeks. For each participant that completed the study, Dr. Jenny Miller and I compared their baseline to scores from their last completed Beck Hopelessness inventory. For this study, the experimental hypotheses were 1, the hopelessness scores from the Beck Hopelessness Scale would improve as the weeks progressed, and 2, the experimental group's hopelessness scores would improve at a faster rate than the control group. If scores would increase at a faster rate for the experimental groups, then this would point to the intervention being successful. Because of these factors, this experiment is a 2-by-3 design, also known as a 2-way factorial. This design is also mixed. This is because the effect of the first independent variables, the differences in journaling prompts, were compared to the participants in different experimental groups. Whereas the second independent variables, the time of testing, were compared between the subjects in the same group. For data analysis, we decided to complete a non-parametric test between groups, specifically a Kruskal-Wallis test, to compare the hopelessness scores and the effects of the independent variables. We also subtracted the participants' last survey completed to their baseline. Because of this, all positive numbers during the upcoming results section imply that the individual experienced decreased hopelessness, as well as a decrease in the negative feelings related to hopelessness. On the other hand, all negative numbers indicate an increase in feelings of hopelessness. Results. Analysis of the raw data involved looking at a non-parametric test between groups, investigating the change between the participants' initial survey and the last survey completed. This was done to see the changes that occurred throughout the duration of the journaling intervention. Because of the small group sizes, the results of this test were inconclusive, pointing toward no change between the three groups in regards to hopelessness scores. The test resulted in a p-value of 0.991, indicating that the intervention had no significant effect. The null hypothesis, which states that there was no difference in hopelessness scores between the groups, should be retained. These results are shown in Figure 1. With this analysis, two graphs were created to show the distribution of changes in scores across the groups. Figure 2 shows the distribution for each group. This graph indicates that there are outliers for the neutral experimental group and the control group. Scores for the positive experimental group range from -5 to +15, whereas the scores for the neutral experimental group range from -5 to +35, with +35 being an outlier. On the other hand, the control group scores range all the way from -10 to +55, with +55 being an outlier. Positive numbers indicate a positive change in hopelessness scores and suicidality, whereas negative numbers indicate that individuals answered more negatively to the true or false prompts in the Beck hopelessness scale. Because of these findings, there are no statistically significant differences between the groups. Because of these extreme outliers in scores, another non-parametric test between groups was used, omitting these outliers. This test found similar results to the previous one, as indicated in Figure 3. This independent sample's Kruskal-Wallis test resulted in a p-value of 0.440, which also indicates that the null hypothesis should be retained. The last graph created for this data analysis shows the changes of hopelessness scores over time, organized by group as indicated in Figure 4. This graph labels different groups with different colors. The positive experimental group indicated in blue, the neutral experimental group indicated in green, and the control group indicated in pink. With this graph, it is easy to see that the data displays a normal distribution throughout all of the groups. Overall, all tests and graphs indicate that there were no significant differences between the groups over the course of the journaling interventions. Now to the discussion of these results. The review of previous literature implied that results were expected to show a decrease in hopelessness scores for both experimental groups, with the biggest difference being between the control group and the group that received the daily journaling prompts that implemented positive psychology techniques. This experiment did not yield these results. If this study was replicated in the future, it is suggested that confounding variables like mental illness, seasonal depression, and lowering grades would be tracked and controlled for. These results indicate that the group's mental health and well-being did not increase throughout the experiment, despite the journaling interventions. It is also important to acknowledge that midterms were the week directly before the beginning of this experiment, and this could be a reason for why the hopelessness scores did not increase. Some students may have received bad grades on midterm finals, and this increased their likelihood for their hopelessness scores to temporarily decrease. As stated previously, some main problems in the study were mortality, participants not filling out the surveys, and punctuality in participants completing the surveys and journals. While some participants completed the surveys right away on Friday mornings when they were sent out, there were others that would not fill them out until the following week after several reminders. For instance, whereas the first survey had 46 responses, the second and final survey only had 29 total responses combined. To fix this problem, the difference between the first response and the most recent response was found for each participant. This helped Dr. Jenny Miller and myself have more data to analyze. Doing this also made it so that a negative result implies an increase in Beck Hopelessness Scale responses throughout the experiment, implying a greater tendency for feelings of hopelessness and a decrease in mental health. Mortality and timeliness of responses could have affected our data, and to fix this problem in the future, one could meet with participants at a scheduled time and place every week to complete the surveys. As previously explained, one limitation of this experiment research project was low participant numbers and low level of participation. There were several participants that completed the journaling prompts but did not finish the weekly surveys, including the questions from the Beck Hopelessness Scale. And because of this, the data used in analysis may not be completely accurate or give a full picture on participants' feelings throughout the experiment. Another implication of the study shows that participants' hopelessness scores in all three groups decreased as the weeks progressed. This indicates that confounding factors may have influenced these results. In the future, experimenters who wish to replicate this study should attempt to recruit more participants. These results could also be due to seasonal depression. Because the experiment occurred throughout late October and early November, it can be expected that there would be a significant decrease in hopelessness scores, since this is the time of the year when days become shorter. This is one confounding variable that, in future research, could be controlled for in the initial survey. For instance, questions regarding current mental illness, including seasonal depression, could be included in the recruitment process. This experiment's findings indicate that the null hypothesis, stating that the journaling intervention showed no effect on hopelessness scores from the Beck Hopelessness Scale as the weeks progressed, should be retained. Lastly, lack of statistical significance does not necessarily mean that there was no effect. We just weren't able to detect it with the research design and the small number of participants. Overall, there were also many questions created throughout the study that can be investigated in future research. More research on daily journaling can help address hopelessness, an important issue in our society, and investigate ways to help people struggling with mental health and hopelessness. On the sides are my references. I also printed off my slideshow if anyone would like to take it and look at my references for slideshow in general. And then, before concluding my presentation, I wanted to acknowledge the following individuals. First is Dr. Tatiana Valian for assistance in formulating and planning prior to the implementation of the study. Secondly, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Dan Miller for assistance throughout the duration of the study. And lastly, Dr. Jenny Miller for assistance in data assessment and analysis. I've included an appendix with the Beck Hopelessness Scale questions if anyone was interested in what all of them were. And I also gave a moment to see if anyone had any questions for me.
I've got one. Okay, so the prompts that you had, you said those came from an outside source. Was that from a pre-existing study, or where did those get drawn from? Because some of those definitely feel like they're focused on the positive. The first slide with the Monday through Friday, but the second one's had some interesting components where it could be shifting your mental focus from the positive to more like, not as maybe positive psychology driven, right?
Yeah, that's something I'll definitely look into if I redid it, because the resource I used was like a .com one.
Okay.
It was had 27 of them. I looked through and picked out ones I thought would work best.
Okay.
So they were like 27 positive journaling prompts
And
to
then-
have a positive life or something like that.
For your prior resources, did they share kind of what they had done for the positive journaling prompts with anything that other people had done, or were those not really included in their studies?
Most of them didn't. A lot of them, they gave them like open, like the one that said, write down 3 things that made you happy today. They're more open. They didn't have specific prompts that they used.
Okay.
They're good.
I have a couple questions, but I'll start with the hopelessness, the Beck hopelessness instrument. Do you think that's the right instrument to use, or having done the research, do you think something different should be used in place of that?
I know there were two possible ones I thought to do, was either the Beck Depression Inventory. I know it's a one that's used a lot, but when I did my literature review, like study of old, like what has been done in the past, a lot of the studies found that like journaling improved like hopelessness, suicidality, and not necessarily like depression as much. So that's why I didn't decide to use that one. After starting, I had like a few people that would message, I think it was just one actually, but one person after the first time they did it, they messaged me and said that it was hard to pick true or false and not like a Likert scale or like more options. And I couldn't really change it because it was the Beck hopelessness scale that was like created by him, and I didn't feel comfortable changing it, so I didn't, but maybe it would be easier to find one that has more of a scale so they don't have to decide between one extreme or the other. But
That's a good
yeah.
reflection.
Yeah.
So my next question is, as a future mental health counselor, do you think this has impacted your attitudes towards possibly using journaling to help patients?
I think it definitely has. Although like my study didn't find the results, but there were just researching it. There's a lot that studies that have found good results, and like the first source said, it's very easy to implement and costs basically no money, and just
So you're as committed, if not more, to using it than prior to the study? Okay.
I'll just ask, although you didn't obtain any statistically significant differences when it came to the quantitative data, the results of the Beck hopelessness scale, and maybe you didn't have enough time, but given time, or what have you seen when you looked at the individual journaling, the contents of the journaling by subjects in the three conditions? Did you see any themes emerging, anything there that might be interesting to pursue, even if whatever difference might have been there didn't translate into different scores on the BHS?
I would say it definitely did. At the end, I kind of thought about asking, like, how did you personally feel about this? Like, did you have any things come out of it that would you keep doing, like the journaling interventions? I thought about asking participants that, but I hadn't included that in my initial IRB, so I couldn't really use that information. I did get it, so that was something that kind of came up later. But looking through the journals, I did notice that the positive group, a lot of them talked about mental illness, like having bipolar disorder, depression, those sort of things. Talking about people that are important in their lives rather than just like the neutral one they were told to do was just talk about their day. So the letter seemed a little bit more meaningful just by looking at it.
Nicely done, Reagan.
Very good. For this book, I guess I have something for you. Let's see. I will not put you, but I will put you. Congratulations. Well done. Very good. Well earned. And I don't know if anyone's coming in here, but I usually like to say thank you all for coming, and certainly success that students have. It's not just them alone, it's the support of others.